All right, welcome back to the People Power Lunch Hour. Once again, I'm your host today, Vanessa Maria Graber, and I'm joined in the studio with special guest Asa Khalif.
Hello.
Hello, welcome to the show.
It's been a long time coming, Sister Vanessa. Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it. I'm feeling the vibe from the opening of the music. I'm feeling it. It's going to be a good show.
We try to keep it jazzy in here. I invited Asa to come on the show to talk about some of the more recent action that he and others have been taking to hold the city accountable for the recent killing of David Jones. You've also been involved in organizing around police violence issues, social justice issues. You've been
Yes.
sort of everywhere.
Yes.
And what I call some of these intersectional movements that are now emerging in Philadelphia.
Yes, absolutely. Even teaming up with our comrades for Tuesday for Toomey. Definitely dealing with the healthcare issue, which affects Black, brown, and poor people. So yeah, we're expanding, and we're building coalitions even within the Black Lives Matter movement. So I'm very excited where the grassroots type of spirit of justice is going at this point. And I think we need to deal with all these issues: police violence. We need to deal with homelessness. We need to deal with healthcare issues. And discrimination. We're not lucky or blessed to be in the 1%. So we have to fend for ourselves. So why not build a coalition and take some of that power away from the 1%? So I'm all for it.
That's right. We've had a lot of people from all of those different campaigns come on the People Power Lunch Hour to kind of talk about the work that we're doing. But I just want to give our listeners and viewers a little bit of background on you in case they're not familiar with you and the work that you do. Of course, the Black Lives Matter movement got started nationally
Yes.
around the death of Trayvon Martin.
Yes.
And it started in the Bay Area with, Alicia Garza and others, and it spread all over the United States.
Yes.
You yourself were directly impacted when your cousin was killed at the hands of the police, Brandon
Yes.
Tate Brown.
Brandon Tate Brown was murdered by a police officer. I don't really like to even say their name. I don't want to give them any more power. But yes, he was murdered by two police officers, one in particular who did the shooting, the other who stood by silently and participated in the shooting in the 15th district in the Northeast. And it was extremely traumatic for my family, extremely traumatic for his mother. Scars like that never really heal. I think it really pushes you to the limit to figure out exactly what you're made of. Because my family had never, I've been the hellraiser in my family. So everyone else in terms of activism was like, oh, that's Asa's thing. But to see his mother, Tanya Brown Dickerson, this is her firstborn, with Brandon. It's still very tough. The scars, like I said, it when you hear of all the police violence and another shooting, we'll get to that soon, it opens up all those old wounds again. His mother got up, and a lot of people didn't know this. Tanya got up every morning, went to work. Every morning, dealing with that pain. She would go to work every morning and be an activist at night. And she had never been an activist before. It was never her role. And she stepped up to the plate to make sure that justice was served and make sure that people knew who her son was and not the horrible image that the media and law enforcement tried to paint. We were able to turn that narrative around and bring people on board to who he was. But the sad part about it was that we had to get arrested. I mean, I was with another group at the time, but the activists and our allies, we got into, it was a brawl. They called it a brawl. We called it search for justice. We were dubbed the Philly 10. And but the fact that we had to even confront police and get arrested just to get the names, and that's where I want people to understand this is not a system that protects poor people. This is a system that protects rich people and privileged people, because we clearly see when someone has money and someone is not a person of color, easily they get the answers that they need. They don't have to get arrested. They don't have to protest. Their influence gives them, and their privilege gives them the names of the officer, and have public officials speak freely and boldly in their defense, demanding answers. As we see with this latest shooting, the police officer is black. The victim, unfortunately, was white. And we see how things are moving quickly as opposed to when it's a person of color. Very slow to respond, very slow to give the answers. So the bottom line is you never get over losing anyone in your family, but especially someone that you lost through violence. And the police were never charged, ever. And this is coming out of the 15th District. And now, fast forward to 2017, we have yet another shooting coming out with another officer who is assigned to the 15th District, and it's our brother David Jones. And we are currently standing with the family and fighting for justice for him. So it's a never-ending cycle. And I know there are a lot of things, sister, that has been written about me, both positive and negative. And people have a certain image, that Asa is anti-police and Asa is this. And I say this over and over again because I have law enforcement in my family, and I love them very dearly. I sit and eat at their table. They raise me. They change my diapers. I love them. Anytime I hear that an officer is shot, I immediately start calling my family members, my uncles, to make sure that they're safe. It's not about being anti-police. You understand? This is about police violence. This is about police brutality. This is about using their privilege of power to abuse black, brown, and poor people. And that's unacceptable. I am not anti-police. I'm anti-police brutality. And I want to remind those who put that uniform on, simply because you put the uniform on doesn't mean you take your humanity off, especially when you're dealing with people in the community that has had a history of being abused by a system that protects that type of abuse.
One of the things I've heard many other activists and organizers around this issue say is, they say the same thing. They're not anti-police. They're against the system and the corruption in the system.
Yes.
And they're also against this, wall of silence where they're protecting one another and not speaking out against the injustices that they witness.
Yeah, and I think I want to know where all these good cops are because I haven't seen any of them on the court stand. I haven't seen them on a witness stand. I haven't seen any of them standing with families in solidarity and say that the police officer was out of line and out of order. I haven't seen anyone snitching on their fellow comrades in the police force. So I'm trying to figure out where all these magical, wonderful good cops are. I think if you want to label yourself a good cop, you must show yourself to be a good cop. And that is action speaks louder than words. So if you have a corrupt officer, if you know that there's abuse and you don't speak on that and shine a light on that, then you fall into the whole spectrum and that whole category of being, quote unquote, a bad cop. If there's very few these small apples of branches of sprinkled of bad police officers, then why aren't the system working to get rid of these officers? Why are these officers continue, like the officer that shot David Jones? This is his second shooting. This is his second time shooting a person of color in the back. 2000, if my math is correct, and brother Ike Raw, if I know he's listening, he's good with the numbers. I'm turning into my father, so you have to excuse me for a minute. But I believe it was 2010 that this officer had shot another black male running away from him.
And he left him paralyzed.
And he left him paralyzed, exactly. No charges was ever brought up on the officer. He was never reassigned. There was a quick investigation. He was cleared, right back on the street again. Fast forward to 2017, here he is again involved in a shooting. This time you see clearly with the video that our dear brother was running away from the police officer, and he shot him in the back, which led to his death. Police officers their job is to protect and serve, not to be judge, jury, and executioner. That's not their job. You are a public servant. If a suspect is fleeing from you, and because you've eaten too many donuts, maybe you didn't maybe you're having a bad day, maybe you don't feel like running, you don't have the right to make that judgment call to shoot someone in the back. There was a racist bigot, John Wayne. his character that he played was always your yellow butt. He would say, "How dare you?" in his little John Wayne voice, shoot a man in the back. Even in the westerns, it was common knowledge that you were a coward if you shot someone in the back. Even in the hood, if you sneak someone, they're walking. That's not a fair fight if you snuck somebody. That type of cowardism is not even accepted in fantasy or in real life. So to shoot this man again in the back. Also, we found that they tried to hide that this man has had multiple complaints against him, by black and brown people. Even one that we spoke with 2 days ago, whose mother came to me last week and said, "Mr. Khalif, we know my daughter is a white woman. She was a sex worker." And she says, "And I know we're not black, but you truly need your assistance on this." And I said to this mother, if your daughter was a victim of police violence, I don't care if she was a sex worker. I don't care if she was white. She was a victim of violence. And that's what Black Lives Matter movement is all about, is standing up and fighting against police violence. And come to find out that it's this officer. She named this officer. Was one of the officers that night that attacked her and kicked her teeth out. People are coming forward because individuals have the courage now to stand and say this is wrong and call this officer out. And many more are going to come as we continue on pressing for information about this police officer. But he's had several complaints that they tried to hide. So this officer, my dear sister, should have been fired from the very beginning. They allowed that monster to stay in our neighborhoods, to occupy our neighborhoods, and to continue to inflict violence in our neighborhoods. And no one is safe now. That's why I say when we are fighting for black, brown, and poor people, because this woman is not a diva. She doesn't live in Rittenhouse Square, Because she's a sex worker doesn't mean that you give the right to put your foot in her butt and kick her teeth out. It doesn't give you the right to do it. And I'm not going to get turned up because I know we're on the air, but that type of crap is unacceptable. And that's why we storm these offices of these politicians who remain silent. And that's why we shut these streets down, because the pigs are not going to abuse our community and people who are vulnerable simply because they have the power to do so.
One of the other facts about the case I read from one of the witnesses was that this officer was transporting witnesses who had just been victims, of a crime, an attempted abduction or something like that. And the fact that he pulled over and stopped with witnesses in the van just to shoot and kill this individual seems very inappropriate and concerning, so much so that even Commissioner Ross addressed that. And then the witness went on to report that he saw the gun drop onto the ground before the officer shot at him. And so that's another fact around the case that's really not being reported. So this individual was completely unarmed, running away with his back turned against him. Again, begs the question, why was he then shot at?
Well, I want to touch on 2 points, and that's, you raised tremendous. That's a great question, but it is not standard police policy. First of all, this officer is 12 years on the force, so he knows better. When you're transporting a witness, especially a witness, it was a father and his 2 children. And according to now published reports, the children were involved in some sort of kidnapping. So they were already traumatized just based on that case. You do not, as you transport from A to B, endanger or make any type of stops, putting the witnesses in danger, or a witness. It could have been an ambush to silence the witness. A lot of things it could have easily have happened. So the officer was completely out of order to do that. Secondly, if the dirt bike meant that much to the officer, he could have easily called that in and had for an officer that was in their district, because this officer was not in his district. This shooting did not happen in the officer's district, which is the 15th district. So
Right, that's in Mayfair, Philadelphia,
exactly,
Northeast Philly, and this
exactly.
was
This is
a little further down on Whitaker
Yes, it
Avenue,
was.
which is the Fountainville,
Yes,
area.
exactly. So he was out of his district yet again, causing havoc. So he was completely out of order just in terms of transporting the witnesses. And that's truly a violation. He should have been suspended just based on that. And also, Police Commissioner Ross, who we met with several weeks ago, me and Christopher Flood, the drummer Norris, who actually broke the story with the witness, who have now came out publicly. And I salute that brother for doing that, because he truly has put himself in danger. There's always a danger when you're going against law enforcement. And he refuted everything that the officer had said in the initial report. Police Commissioner Ross said it gave him pause. Well, I think it's time for Commissioner Ross, with all due respect, to get off of pause. This is something that is beyond pause at this point. And now that the witness has come forward and had the bravery to do that, it shines another light that we see the tape. We see with our own eyes that our dear brother was running away from the officer. It gives more insight now that the witness has come forward and given his statement, which completely contradicts what the police tried to put out there. So, I don't want to say cover up, but we cannot turn a blind eye to the fact that the house is burning. We smell the smoke. We don't have to see the fire. We know the house is on fire. And this situation, this shooting, did not have to happen. The officer did not have to stop and get out, did not have to have a confrontation with our brother, and certainly did not have to shoot him. If it was that serious to the officer, he should have just let him flee. He had he had the identification of the suspect. He could have ID'd the suspect, could have called in for backup. He did not have to shoot David Jones in the back like a coward that he is. But this is something, again, that he was allowed to get away with. So it's in his spirit, and I tell people on a level, we're fighting a spiritual battle too, because it's evil when you look at someone and judge them based on their color or their sexual orientation or their economic status and decide that you want to be violent and to discriminate against them. That's a spirit of evil. And, and so we have to understand that we're fighting a physical fight, but we're fighting a spiritual fight too. So when I call them devils, doesn't mean because they're white, they're because they are acting just like the spirit of Satan, which is to go and kick a woman because she was a sex worker and kick her teeth out, was to go and shoot someone or stop and frisk, and now stop and fondle, which is sexual assault. I mean, these things are just evil. People who have a good heart and a good spirit don't participate or don't think of harming people and kicking people down because they can. So that's an evil spirit, in my opinion, and it's a spirit that has plagued black, brown, and poor people from generations. This is generational type of violence that our community faces. This is nothing new with Mike Brown, nothing new with David Jones, nothing new with Brandon Tate Brown, Trayvon Martin. The list goes on and on. Our dear sister Sandra Bland. This is just institutional violence, racism, white supremacy, privilege, all those things wrapped into one big fist to oppress black and brown and poor people. And I think right now what you're seeing is that people are rising up. This is coalitions that you've never seen. These are people who have never worked together now are working together because we're tired of the BS. Everybody is not going to be peaceful when you shoot down their mothers and you shoot down their sons and their daughters. I'm not calling for violence. I'm telling you, everybody is not going to respond the way my family responded, peacefully and peaceful protest and calling for peace when our loved one was shot. People are now coming out. Philando Castile's mother, God bless her, Sister Valerie Castile, Mother Valerie Castile, she said, F the police. She got tired of it because that's a human raw response. Everybody can't go and say, thank you, Jesus. Even Jesus Christ, for God's sake, flipped the tables over and started whipping the hypocrites out of the temple. Everybody is not going to stand by while police over and over get away with killing their loved ones and their friends. At some point, there's going to be a breaking point, and we've seen it throughout time. And then when we turn up, everybody wants to come out and say, let's talk peace. The time for peaceful talking is now. The time for talking about justice is when they prosecute these police officers. But if you keep going to the grand juries and you keep saying that there's nothing here, keep moving, here's some money, go away, it's not going to go away. We are on a break of serious action. You can feel it in the air. It's all in the air. You can feel it. It's in the air because folks are tired. They're tired of being oppressed. They're tired of being victimized. They're tired of not having any justice. They're tired of these reverends, these handkerchief, Negro, fried chicken eating reverends coming the hell out talking about some Jesus and peaceful, and your loved one can't even get an indictment, for God's sakes. So we're tired of talking. It's getting to the point now where folks are going to shut this thing down. And maybe that's what they only understand. Maybe, and I'm just saying maybe, if you shoot one of us on Monday and we got to go to a funeral on Monday, maybe you have to go to a funeral on Monday too. Maybe you'll get the point then. I'm just telling you, the people are tired. And so you can't say that I'm causing violence. You're causing violence on yourselves by not holding these officers accountable when they kill black, brown, and poor people. There has to be a reckoning. At some point, people are going to have to say the hell with it. Let it pop off if it's going to pop off.
I mean, history has shown us all around the world that that's exactly what's happened. I just want to let our listeners know you're listening to the People Power Lunch Hour. We're here at Philly Cam. We're talking with Asa Khalif. He's a local organizer, activist with Black Lives Matter movement, and he's also an independent filmmaker, writer, and producer. And we've been talking about police violence and accountability. So more on the accountability part. How do we quantify that? Because police are saying we are holding them accountable. We had an investigation and it came up nothing. What kind of accountability are you talking about? And what specific actions can the police departments, not just in Philadelphia, but across our nation, take in order to, fulfill their duty of being transparent and getting justice?
They have to be transparent, period. And police have to be able to stand and break that blue wall of silence. We need to see. It's one thing to say transparency. It's another thing to show transparency. It's another thing to say that we are for reform. We need to see it. It has to be action that we need to see at this point. It's just the talking. I think we're beyond the talking at this point. People want justice, and people deserve justice. And so if the police truly are interested in bridging the gap, interested in actually having a relationship with the community, then they're going to have to step up. They're going to have to call out their individual police officers when they do wrong. We need to see the prosecutors prosecute these officers, and we need convictions at this point. Then we can talk about, okay, maybe things are changing for the best. But we haven't seen anything. We've had several major cases of police brutality and murders, and no one has gone to jail. And firing someone or allowing that police officer to retire with a pension or whatever is not justice. I think the family deserve justice. Any family that has ever been a victim or been impacted by police violence, you would ask them the same. We want justice. And that demand doesn't end simply because someone pays you off or gives the family a certain amount of money. Justice, or the demand for justice, doesn't end because the police officer is fired or transferred somewhere or quits. The bottom line is, if you truly are interested in building and healing the community, then we need to see a direct action from those who are involved in law enforcement and have those powers to prosecute. We need justice at the end of the day.
What role does the FOP play in all of this? Because, to some, you don't even hear a lot of comments from the officers themselves.
Mhm.
All of the statements come from the FOP as if
Yes.
they're representing everybody.
And I think that's where police officers of color need to. I know we have the Garden Civic League, and they have a voice, and they are speaking out, especially when the FOP endorsed here in Philadelphia Donald Trump, and that type of just blatant ignorance and privilege, to ignore all of the other officers of color and ignore all the other officers who are a part of the Muslim faith, which the Trump administration have continually attacked. To have that type of blanket racism and privilege to say, hey, and this is coming from all of us, we're endorsing this man, whether you like it or not, I think it sends a message to the black and brown officers that are part of that system. How much does the system really care for you? And I say this all the time, we're on the front line. I'm not your enemy, because take you out of that uniform, you're just like me. Take the sisters who are black and brown, who are working in that system, take you out, you're Sandra Bland, hung in the cell. So do not think that your education, do not think that your affiliation with police office or the law enforcement is going to say, or your money is going to save you from anti-blackness. It's not. And I think if you really are concerned about your community, again, you step up, you engage in the community. You come from 26 in Oxford. Why would you go and come back into your community and work with someone who is not a person of color to brutalize the people that you grew up around, the people that saved you, the people that may not have been idol or the ideal type of role models, but I know a lot of cats who were on the block who saved a lot of brothers who were on their way to college from being bullied, and said, no, you're not getting into this because you're going to make a difference one day. So a lot of those cats did that. The same mercy that they gave, and particularly one cop I know that comes from 26 in Oxford, used to get beat up all the time, from my uncles used to tell me, and they came and stopped it because you had a vision for yourself. Don't go back into that community and beat black and brown people and youth. Use some of that mercy that folks gave you and that encouragement to encourage them and change their direction. But don't get caught up in this system that I'm going to ride and die for this system, because this system is not going to protect you when you're outside of that uniform. And we've seen many accounts of cases of police officers who are people of color, who've been murdered out of their uniform. One in particular a few months ago, and he worked for the force, I think 15, 20 some years he was on the force, and they all knew him. But when he was out of that uniform, he was just another end to them, and that's the word that they used before they let a whole bunch of bullets in him, according to the witness's account. So anti-blackness is alive and well. Do not get a sense of false hope. Think that you're in a certain section than anyone else, because we're all Sandra Bland, we're all Trayvon Martin, we're all Michael Brown. At the end of the day, when you encounter an officer who doesn't see anything other than your color, not your education, not your religion, not that you feed the homeless every day, not that you're a teacher, they don't, or a rabbi, or your religion, they don't see any of that. They see color and the negative stereotypes that come along with that. So I think we just have to, again, as our sister Stada Shakur says, we have to love and protect one another at this point. And I'm very happy, because it's been a spirit to try to divide black and brown people. And I'm so happy that our Latino brothers and sisters are now waking up and saying, wait a minute, I sat with Najee Rivera's family, our dear brother's deceased now. But during his trial, when the police officers, their trial, when they were caught on camera beating this brother up, I sat with his family. I sat with the family and the fiance of Najee Rivera. I met his brothers and his family members, and had that dialogue with our Latino brothers and sisters, that they even admitted that it was much needed. we've isolated. We've allowed this system to isolate ourselves and make our enemies. Oh, if you're Puerto Rican, you're Dominican, you're an enemy. You don't know our struggle. We are all in this together, and we're finally, if anything good came out of the Trump administration, is that black and brown people are coming together, and we are forming these unbreakable coalitions. I'm so excited about it now because it gives us hope that we can truly together demand the justice that we so richly deserve. So we are making progress in the midst of the craziness. We are rising out of the ashes like the phoenix, and that's a beautiful metaphor.
I like it. We're going to take a break on that note. This is the People Power Lunch Hour, and I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber. And we've been speaking with Asa Khalif. He's a local organizer and activist, and we've been talking about police brutality and Black lives. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll have more with Asa Khalif, and we're going to talk about some of his media work. Stay tuned. You're listening to WPPM 106.5 FM and Philly Cam TV. All right, welcome back to the People Power Lunch Hour. I'm your host, Vanessa Maria Graber, and you're listening on WPPM 106.5 FM and watching live on PhillyCam TV. We've been talking with Asa Khalif. He is a local organizer, activist with the Black Lives Matter movement. He's been fighting for justice for families who are victims of police violence. And he's been involved in a lot of other intersectional movements here in Philadelphia. We were just talking about building coalitions,
Yes.
building bridges,
Yes.
and unifying people in Philadelphia.
Definitely. Well, I want to also thank, because we did an action the other day where we stormed the offices of the managing director, and we shut down the police advisory committee, who for 5 weeks now had never even spoken, and some never even saw the video of the shooting of David Jones. So, but I want to thank, first of all, my comrade in crime and my dear brother, Chris Flood, the drummer Norris, and our dear brother Ike Raw, who is a spokesperson standing for the family, who actually had the vision to start and organize the first protest in front of the 15th district. And he didn't wait for any of the organizations to announce it. He did it on his own, and that's what grassroots is all about. It starts with a passion, and then you take the courage and the boldness to go forward. So I want to give him a shout out, because he's definitely on the cutting edge, and this brother's going to do great things. He has a light around him, sister, believe me. And then we're bringing a clergy in, always standing on the line for justice, our Reverend Clay, who was right there with us and has been at every rally and every protest, standing with the family. And then we always have our elder brother, Greg Brinkley, who was formerly head of the National Action Network, but has been on the front line since advocating for former gang members. So he's been in the cut for a long time. And these are the type of people that you surround yourself with. So, so you can have a clear vision and have that support. And so it's not all by yourself. You need a team, and you need people with like minds and like spirits, that's not trying to be, quote unquote, make a come up from the pain of black and brown people by being a celebrity out of this thing, because this is nothing to be celebrated. We put our bodies on the line. We are constantly in danger. I know I'm completely targeted, just as someone who's known in the Black Lives Matter movement. So I know that, and there is a risk to that. And every time we get arrested, we always put ourselves in danger. There is no guarantee we're going to come out safely once we're in police custody. Many of our activists, brothers and sisters, never made it out, especially in Ferguson now. We're hearing a lot of the deaths and stuff, and even in Chicago, coming in contact with police. So there is a certain danger to it, and there is no logic to it. You just have a calling on your life to do it.
Yeah, there's a certain irony that, I've noticed. I've been covering protests and social movements since the anti-war protests,
Yes.
that people calling for peace and an end to war and, no to the bombs, all of that are the ones being brutalized by
Yes,
police oftentimes. And then you see the same thing with people coming out. Because, Black Lives Matter is a hashtag. It is the name of a movement. But really, it is all about stopping violence,
Absolutely.
stopping the deaths, accountability. And people calling for an end to violence are then violently arrested oftentimes.
Exactly. Absolutely. And we're constantly met with aggression. And it's kind of like a contradiction, because the police are there to protect and serve, not there to brutalize. And even when we have our white allies with us, the way police handle black bodies in an arrest as opposed to white bodies, sometimes there is a flip side to that. We do see sometimes, especially in the DNC, I saw white allies being handled a little differently than aggressively that they handled us in a very aggressive
Absolutely.
way.
I was just going to mention that there was multiple protests that week. We were on the scene. It was the first week WPPM
Yes.
went on the air.
Right.
So we try to do a local news broadcast every day covering the actions of the DNC.
Yes.
And one of the things that struck me is that, everyone was getting really like kind of nervous and stressed out about how the police would react to these protests.
Yes.
And then when it kicked off, it seemed uh, pretty peaceful. People were allowed to assemble at City Hall and at the park and
Yes.
march down Broad Street without permits. And everything seemed like, okay, I think this new commissioner is taking a different approach, you know. But then there was the action that happened. It was a march that started at Broad and Erie.
Yes.
It went all the way up Broad Street, came
Exactly.
to a head again, like near Arch Street, Race Street, around there
Yes.
near City Hall. And again, people were met with violence. And it seemed so contrasting to all the earlier protests throughout the week and the day that were not received in the same way.
They targeted us. That group that I was formerly associated with is actually changed their name, so I won't give the name out. That's not the name they go under at this point. But a lot of our members were met. For those who were active with that group at the time, was met with aggression, and it sparked off a lot in terms of trying to escalate it. And thank God that we had people in place to continue to keep the crowd focused and to de-escalate that, and also call out police officers who were disguised as activists who wanted to try to start issues that way. So we would have to stop it and show, flash a light on them, say this person is here to be a troublemaker, to bring violence to our peaceful protest. And so, yeah, we made it to it. I think our goal was to go to the Patterson, and where they were holding their tea party, so to speak, at the DNC. But we were met with definite aggression, taunting. There were police officers who had, and that was exposed, who had racist tattoos on. And I think a journalist, grassroots journalist, exposed that. These are the people that were out there. These are the people that we come in contact with at a protest. But these are people that are black, brown, and poor comrades come in contact in their community. Someone who's boldly wearing a white supremacist type of tattoo, you can only imagine the mindset when they come in contact when there is no cameras on them. So yeah, it's a difference. But I think even now we're seeing it shift again, because they were extremely violent towards those who were protesting in front of Pat Toomey's office on Tuesday. They have been met increasingly with aggression and violence, even those who are in their wheelchairs, who were leading that type of march. So I think we're just seeing now the escalation of police violence because they have been given a pass to do so by this administration and by the Attorney General now. So it's kind of like open season at this point.
But even before that, I just want to say, anybody going back to, the WTO, World Trade Center, the WTO and World Bank protests in Seattle, again, people were calling an end to these like evil capitalist policies. They were met with violence. The Occupy movement was met with violence. A lot of environmentalists who are protesting against fracking, which now we know so many studies show is poisoning the air, the gas in the land.
Exactly.
And again, it's, Black Lives Matter movement. It's been a long pattern of aggression and violence towards peaceful protesters.
It's truly generational. And that's the sad part about it, because I hear stories from my grandparents, and nothing's changed other than maybe the hairstyle and the clothes that they wore when they were protesting. I mean, it's worse. And I know people say, well, we've made changes. We have not made changes when folks cannot get justice. When our Native Americans are being abused just for standing their ground and protecting something that belongs to them.
And now it's come out that, the local and state officials employed a private security firm, that has contractors working in all parts of the world. Again, you have to ask the question, why do you need a private security firm like that to deal with peaceful protesters, or as they call themselves, the water protectors?
Yes.
And many of us have watched the videos and the live streams.
Horrible.
of people getting
Horrible.
literally mowed down
Hmm.
with anything you can think of. You know,
Hmm.
pepper gas is sprayed on them,
Yes.
tear gas, water cannons are
Dogs
used,
bites.
dogs are biting
Dogs are
them.
biting. Yes.
You know, they use every resource possible. Even in the last couple weeks, the G20 protests,
Mm-hmm.
we were watching, you know, the live stream here at Philly Cam, and watching people who were peacefully assembled get sprayed with these water cannons. It looked
Yes.
very dangerous.
And their job now, again, even in their training, is to be aggressive, to be militant. Um, we're not dealing with the image of a police officer rescuing a cat in a tree or walking a kid, across the street or elderly person. I mean, they're attacking the elderly as well, and our trans people of color, which leads me to our project in terms of filmmaking. There was a trans sister by the name of Niza Morris a few years back who was found laying in the middle of the street with a trauma to the head. She had been hit with something clearly that was heavy that put a gash in her head. I'd say it was a police baton. If I ask, I can't go into it, I know because of time, but if you Google Niza Morris' story, you'll see that she was visibly drunk leaving a club in Center City. The police were called. The police have a history of arresting trans women of color, accusing them or charging them with prostitution or open drunkenness or anything to charge our trans sisters. They could just be sitting there talking, and they would come in to make that arrest. And so she had enough presence of mind to when the police showed up to say, "I don't want to be around them. I don't feel safe." And her friends were around, and the police came and said, no, we're just going to give her a courtesy ride and take her home, make sure that she's safe. This is all in the report. Well, first of all, white police officers don't give trans people courtesy rides, period. And they certainly don't give trans women of color courtesy ride. Niza Morris lived in West Philadelphia. They were from the 6th District in Center City. It just doesn't even make sense that they would even take a courtesy ride from Center City all the way to West Philadelphia because they're so in love with this trans woman of color. But the investigation went on, and the officers were cleared, and the open the case is still open in terms of the investigation of the murder case is still open, but the officers, 3 of them, were cleared, even though there were contradictions in their reports, their history of violence again in the community. So, from the Philadelphia Gay News, Timothy Swick has been on top of this story, and I've been working with Timothy ever since Niza's death for years. So, as a filmmaker, I made a film called America Black. I made several films, but this was the one that I really put my heart and soul in because it gave information, and it was a tribute to my cousin Brandon Tate Brown. So it's available on YouTube. It debuted 2 years back at the Rotunda Theater, and it was rave reviews. It was a very good piece of work that I've done. That was part of. Um, I'm working, and it's almost finished. I've been secretly working for a year and a half on a documentary titled "Who Killed Niza Morris." We're going to debut that in December, I believe, for the anniversary of when she was murdered. And it's going to, I think you will be amazed at the stuff that we've uncovered. Some of the stuff that the information that the police have desperately tried to hide. Um, my my dad always said money talks and BS takes the bus. So you can pay to get certain things, that information that police or law enforcement thought was not attainable. I'll put it that way. So we have information, and I think if it will be a tribute to Niza. Um, I know there have been many stories written about Niza Morris, but I think this will tell her true story, who she was. She was more than just a transgender woman of color found lying in the middle of the street and died later, 2 days later, from her injuries. It will show that Niza Morris was a businesswoman. Niza Morris was an entertainer. Niza Morris was a Buddhist. A lot of people didn't know that. She was very spiritual. You know, she was more than what the police tried to paint her. And I think when we have individuals who have come in contact with police, especially people of color, especially our trans sisters and brothers, it's important that we remember them as their friends and their families remembered them, and not as the press or the spin from law enforcement to clear their officers. So definitely in December, Who Killed Niza Morris, and Asa Khalif film, and I hope, I'm sure you will be blazing on the radio, but I would really want to come back and revisit it, because we'll have a private screening, and we're going to work with you guys to do something that we can collaborate to have that type of screening. And I think it's important. I stand 100% with our LGBTQ, especially our trans people. I'm not ashamed to say it. You know, I know there's a lot of transphobia and homophobia, unfortunately, that's still out there. But that's why I love being a part of the Black Lives Matter movement, because we give trans people, our brothers and sisters, a voice. We give the LGBTQ, especially people of color, black and brown, a voice to lead. I have let organize protests, many protests, and let our trans sisters and brothers lead that protest. I think it's appropriate. I'm not a trans person. I have no way in hell leading a trans march. So if we're going to call for justice for trans people, it will be led, if I'm involved, by trans people, and they will take that bullhorn, and I will follow their lead. So, but yeah, definitely, and that's just part of being a filmmaker. That's another way of activism. And
Yeah, using the media
yeah,
to tell
definitely,
your story.
absolutely. And then I do more than just. I try to Philly Magazine did a feature a few weeks back, and I try to tell people, because I get a lot of inbox and emails and say, you should relax. I'm like, yo, I have a business that's extremely successful in real estate. I praise God for that, because it gives me the ability to do this. And so I'm good with that. And I'm going to have a class coming up also in the fall, in terms of purchasing real estate, teaching. It's going to be free for people of color. And then it will be free for everyone else. But I think people of color need to really get into buying and spending and property and building wealth. And also for those who are in the entertainment business, I have a lot of friends who are in that business, rappers and so on. Buying publishing rights. You'd be surprised the songs that you sing that I own.
Yeah, it's important, because a lot of people aren't aware that African Americans and Latinos, we lost a lot of our wealth.
Absolutely.
During the recession.
Yes.
Like a lot,
Yes.
and that comes in all different forms. People lost their pensions,
Yes,
they lost their real estate, they lost their cars, their jobs,
Yes.
and they haven't really recovered from that.
Exactly.
And now we have a whole generation of students, who are up to their, ears in student loan debt.
Yes.
And those jobs are not there,
Yes,
So we
exactly.
need to find other ways to employ people from our own communities.
Definitely.
And especially, I talked to a guy last week who's really interested in teaching young people about entrepreneurship,
Right.
and giving them other options.
That's great.
Because, it's all related, right?
Yeah, it is. Really?
Poverty, being in these neighborhoods,
Mhm.
being exposed to the drug market, all of
Yes.
that,
Mhm.
continues this pattern of violence. So
And every community teaches its own. We're the only ones that take our money and can't wait to spend it outside of our community. And I think and I've always admired the Latino community, because even with my friends, especially with Alex, I saw how they built generational wealth. They started a business and they passed it on. So even those family members who were in trouble with the law and could not get jobs, they had employment because the family had the business and taught generations how to run that business to keep wealth there. And I think what black people are now back again learning, because we're waking up, is that we truly need to to deal with generational wealth and to build that type of wealth, not to rent. We're coming out of that mentality that, if you get a nice fab apartment, it's okay. No, get a nice fab house, fix it up. It's yours. You can pass it to your children. You don't have to deal with a scummy landlord to kick you out because they want to raise the rent.
yeah, we have somebody from Legal services come down to talk about all the
Yeah,
evictions and
exactly.
the violence that comes along with being
Absolutely.
removed by police from their
Yes.
homes.
And the fear, because you don't know. They give you a date, but we've had incidents where we've gotten calls at Black Lives Matter Movement Pennsylvania chapter. We've got personal calls where they came a day early or 2 days early, and they were banging on the door. And there's nothing more intimidating when you're alone and law enforcement with the landlord is banging on your door saying, "Get out." And you try to explain yourself, and they take it and dismiss it and threw the person out. So we, again, need stations like this where we can get the information. Our people perish for lack of knowledge. If we get the information and have the resources and the contact people, we can say, keep banging. I'm not going to let you in, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin, okay? I'm calling someone because I heard it on this station that will have direct information to give me, and I'll have access to an attorney that can advise me, even if I let you in. So we are building information within our community. We're not waiting for the national media or the local media that is dominated by stereotypes and white supremacy. We are creating our own network, and thank God for social media. We have avenues now to give the information out when it's needed. I think it's extremely important.
That's right. Every Wednesday here on the People Power Lunch Hour. So on that note, again, I just want to thank you for coming down and telling your story and empowering people.
I appreciate that, sister. Thank you for having me. And again, you can reach us on Facebook at Black Lives Matter Movement Pennsylvania Chapter. My email is Asa Khalif, ASA KHALIF at gmail.com. We do get responses. We do respond. So trust me, if you send me an email with an issue of police violence or even a housing situation, so we have a homeless program that we deal with also. So please, get in contact with us. And, again, it's what Sister Stada Shakur said, sister, we must love and protect each other at this point because we have nothing to lose but our chains.
All right. This is the People Powered Lunch Hour on WPPM 106.5 FM and also on Philly Cam TV. You can find this episode and all of our episodes of the People Powered Lunch Hour at phillycam.org. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode. I'm Vanessa Maria Graber. Thank you so much for listening and watching.